Let's start with an uncontroversial opinion. The music for Deltarune is insanely good. Lots of people have made great videos discussing how good it is, but I wanted to add something to the conversation that was more focused on what the sound design of the game actually means. That's why this video is going to be about how the sound design of Deltarune affects the narrative, and how it directly impacts the way the game feels to play. Hello all, I hope you are well. I've been thinking a lot about the sound design of Deltarune since the release of Chapter 4, and I wanted to make a video about how it factors into how we as players experience Deltarune. Sound is woven into the world and narrative of Deltarune, so let's dig into why that is. Let's start by examining how music works in the overall world of Deltarune, and then we can specifically examine how Toby weaponizes it against us. Like most other video games, Deltarune features music themed to each area of the game, which I'm going to refer to as atmospheric music. Areas like Cyber City feel so different from places like Card Castle due to this wild difference in atmospheric music. The upbeat and fun synths of Cyber City perfectly complement the wacky and fun boss of the chapter, Queen. The brooding and intense music of Card Castle are perfect for King, a character desperate to seem like a tough bad guy. The biggest advantage of this is that when an area is meant to feel totally different, the music reflects this. Think back to Chapter 2 when entering Queen's basement. The song Pandora Palace could not be more different than Digital Roots, a creepy track that makes you feel as though you've entered a place you shouldn't be. The same is true for every area we meet secret bosses, as without fail, the atmospheric music when we're near them is completely different than not only the rest of the chapter, but also the area right next to it. Let's run through all the examples really quick for the secret bosses. In Chapter 1, the track that plays before we meet Jevil is titled Circus, and features muted pan flutes alongside a lone piano and string line. The difference in instrument choice between Circus and all the other tracks found in Card Castle is staggering. The tracks in Card Castle share not a single instrument with Circus, aside from the string line from Basement. It really makes selecting the floor on the elevator feel like traveling far away, and the echoes of the footsteps being here make it feel surreal. Nowhere else in Card Kingdom is there footsteps, even in places where it would make sense to have it, like the basement or the long hall before you face King. Chapter 2 features this same quirk of wildly different music around secret bosses, but we don't just get it once, we get it a full 3 times. When we first meet Spamton, we go from Attack of the Killer Queen, one of Deltarune's all-time banger tracks, to Hey Every, which features strange sounds that perfectly fit the way Spamton looks and talks. This difference is notable, but it's not nearly as impactful as the other two. Moving to Spamton's shop, the closest area with an OST is outside of the trash zone, which plays Welcome to the City, an upbeat and happy track. Spamton's shop theme is called Dial Tone and features an aesthetic that can only be described as truly uncomfortable, with a strange phone ringing that occasionally interrupts it. The sound design here gets even more interesting, as I'm not sure how many of you know this, but Spamton has 2 shop themes, with you getting the second one after you put him in the keygen. The second shop theme is untitled, but is much slower and is pitch shifted. It feels even creepier, as all you see is a blank text box and a blank wall where Spamton once was. As mentioned earlier, Pandora Palace is the theme for Queen's Mansion, and completely clashes with Digital Roots, the theme of the basement. The length of this segment, combined with the sparse audio from Digital Roots, make the scene feel like you're slowly creeping towards something that you should be dreading. Digital Roots being a sparse and quiet track also perfectly syncs with the visuals of the section. The basement is huge, and has a feeling that anything of importance in this area has come and gone long before we as a player visit it. Moving on to Chapter 3 though, we see the most clear-cut example of how a music transition can totally change the feel of a scene with the Sword Route. The first track we hear in the Sword Route is the aptly titled Sword, which features a lighthearted tune that would not be out of place in a Zelda game. That's why it's so shocking to go from that to total silence when killing the final enemy, and then even more shocking when you get the jingle for picking up the ice key, which sounds like some corruption of audio. The second stage of the Mantle game features the sword track once again, but after progressing through the stage, we're eventually met with total silence again before The track Northern Light. One of the creepiest tracks in the game that feels completely out of place with Mantle, but actually fits perfectly with the room we play the sword route in. I don't know if any of you guys have ever had a similar experience, but playing games in the dark with the glow of the screen as the only light, it always made things feel exponentially creepier as a kid. The room of the sword route is completely dark, except for the TV. The track Sword perfectly fitting the game is expected, but Northern Light is a track that fits much more not with the Mantle game, but the room we play the Mantle game in. A dimly lit, creepy room that we had to go out of our way to find. And speaking of creepy, oh boy, here comes Glacier. This track feels very similar to songs that people called creepy in old games, and is especially reminiscent of Lavender Town from the first Pokemon games. In fact, both tracks feature 4-note arpeggios, and are both written in minor chords, with Glacier being written in F-sharp minor, and Lavender Town being written in E minor. Glacier is most of what contributes to the sword route having such an uncomfortable atmosphere, as it loops constantly, just like Noelle's blog post said it would. This repetitive nature is a through line with most of the old creepy songs and games. Moving to the night, there's actually a bunch to discuss, but none of it's related to the track Black Knife. Before we fight against the Roaring Night, there's that atmospheric howling wind, but the real kicker is the way that the night builds tension by its entrance. The night completely cuts off Tenna's speech by slashing him, but let's look a little closer at that moment. Tenna's music is that of jubilation, as it's literally him congratulating us for being the winners of his game show. The applause and jubilation are completely cut off, with nothing but the sound of the track, Breath, which is exactly what it sounds like. The night heavily breathing with sparse instrumentation behind it. Every single one of these proves one point without a doubt. When Toby wants to make a moment feel tense or high stakes, the music is the first tool he uses. Gerson is an outlier here, as his music is not designed to make us feel uncomfortable, but quite the opposite. It's designed to make us feel comfortable. The track Fireplace makes us feel right at home, and makes the study feel like a safe place in the Dark World. The real kicker is the subversion of expectations that happens when we reach the second sanctuary and we face the sound of justice. This suit of armor tricks us into thinking it's Gerson, and the eerie rendition of the track Wise Words complement the flavor text of the save point, which references the fireplace as stale and providing no warmth. This is a classic bait and switch. We're taught that the study is a place of safety, one that we can always return to, and then hit with the realization that not only is it unsafe now, but it may actually be less safe than facing whatever's outside of it. The music for this section is a crucial part of building this tension. Imagine this: if the study played the same fireplace track, it would feel like the rest of the Dark World had so far. Strange, warped, but not evil. But that's all for the regular route music, so it's time to discuss how music contributes to the Weird Route's strange feeling. The first thing of note with the Weird Route related to sound design is that there is literally a jingle associated with it. We're primed to understand that whenever we hear that sound, we have succeeded in derailing a part of the story. That's a lot less significant than the other Weird Route sounds in a narrative sense, but the fact that we associate that sound with something going wrong as Deltarune players shows that it is an incredibly effective piece of sound design. The first thing to note is how the Weird Route changes the music in almost every associated area. In Chapter 2, the background music of Cyber City slows down greatly on a Weird Route, and the OST of Queen's Mansion, Pandora Palace, even becomes a remix of Deal Gone Wrong. These contribute greatly to the atmosphere of the Weird Route feeling like something is going wrong with the game. But let's get into the main event of the Weird Route in Chapter 2, the Birdly fight. The two tracks for Birdly are completely unrecognizable compared to the main route tracks. They almost match Birdly's changed emotions as desperation seeps through these tracks. But that's nothing compared to actually using Snowgrave in the fight. The music cuts and then slowly fades back in, becoming an uncomfortable jingling, and the visuals show the power of the Snowgrave spell. After this, the whole chapter changes forever. We can no longer reverse the effects or call it off. All we can do is proceed through the altered ending, and this change is crucial. I don't think I've ever heard of someone doing the weird route as their first playthrough. The changes are meaningful and creepy precisely because we know what should be happening. In this sense, we're a lot like Ralsei, another character who can understand that something has gone catastrophically wrong. Switching gears to Chapter 4 though, I imagine you already know what scene I'm about to talk about. Let's talk about the "why couldn't she just talk to you in front of me" scene, aka the empty dialogue box jump scare. The scene where it takes place does not have atmospheric music, but it does have the sound of rain. In this case, the tension comes not from the sound, but from the lack of sound. Many horror games use the same concept to build tension, because in a way, even creepy music provides a sense that something is going to happen, but the lack of sound creates a tense feeling of uncertainty. The lack of sound in this case makes it feel as though the moment is for us, the player, and not for the characters of the world, as though time itself has stopped. In the silence update to the Spamton sweepstakes, we got a teaser for tracks that we can expect on the weird route. The one that matters for this discussion is H.MP3, a song from Chapter 5 that is a corrupted version of the track A Town Called Hometown from Chapter 1. The H, in this case, clearly standing for hometown. This relates strongly to the scene I mentioned with Gerson earlier, as we expect a happy and upbeat track, but the music responds by ripping away the sense of security that we've come to expect. This final piece of evidence is what I want to use to create a conclusion about music in the weird route. Throughout the weird route of all chapters so far, music has been a tool Toby has leveraged against us, the player, not only to differentiate itself from the normal route, but also to instill a feeling of dread in the player. Speaking of dread and sound in Deltarune, some of the strangest sound effects can be found related to the Titans and to the Roaring Night. The first sound we encounter from this is what I talked about earlier, the track Breath, but right after that, the Night has an extremely interesting sound. Right before we fight the Night, they let out a guttural roar, and the whole screen shakes as their ribcage explodes open, revealing a third eye where their organs should be. This sound effect is really unique, and lends itself to us as a player feeling like they're a fearsome foe. Another interesting sound can be found during the Night fight, as the battle box is torn open during the Tempest attack. It sounds deep, which always struck out to me, because it feels like the sword should be cutting the battle box, but the sound makes it feel like it's being torn apart by some primal force. The most interesting pairing of sounds and visuals, though, comes when the final blow is dealt to the Knight, and we see them clip out of existence repeatedly, like a TV slowly losing the channel it's trying to tune into. The strange appearance of the Knight in this scene pairs perfectly with the static of the sound effect, and it truly makes it feel like we were able to sever them from the moment. But then we lose. No matter how hard we fight, we can't win. But this leads to another fascinating sound, the swoon sound effect and the Knight's slash. Both of these serve a similar purpose. They differentiate the Knight from all other foes. We feel as though the damage they inflict isn't really like normal damage. It's almost as though the Black Knife pierces the very souls of our party. But moving from Chapter 3 to Chapter 4, the Knight shares a unique sound effect with everyone's favorite feline in the code, image_friend. The Knight's laugh is the same as Friend's laugh, which most people know, but I still think it's significant. This is the only time we hear sound escape the Knight's mouth, outside of the roar mentioned above. And this time, instead of it being an action on its own, it's directly responding to Susie declaring that the Knight has lost and could never beat them. This is the first time the Knight has shown itself capable of understanding what we're saying, which is part of why the laugh is so off-putting. I find the Knight super cool and can't wait to see more of what they're like as a character. But the next thing to talk about is the Titan, and this thing is strange. Some of the sound effects are really unique, but by far my favorite is the healing sound. Earlier in this video, I talked a lot about how changes to the expected sounds make things feel totally different, which is part of why the heal sound caught me so off guard. It almost sounds like the spawn it's absorbing are speaking, calling out something in unison. And the first sound effect we hear from the Titan, I find equally important in establishing it as something that is truly unique in the confines of Deltarune. The hatching and the first attack. Not the first attack of the actual fight, I mean when the hand reaches out and blasts a column of energy at us. All of the sounds of the Titan and of the Knight support the fact that they are either not of this world or exist in a way completely unlike the other residents of the game, and I think the sounds associated with them support this idea. There's a huge piece of Deltarune music that only a couple of people have mentioned, but I think it's so far beyond interesting, I had to make a whole section about it. In Chapter 4, we can make Chris play songs on the grand piano. 3 of the songs we can play are The Legend, It's Pronounced Rules, and Dark Sanctuary. All 3 of these have exactly one thing in common. For The Legend, Ralsei comments, "Oh," and blushes deeply, with Susie cracking a joke about how he played that to serenade him. For It's Pronounced Rules, Ralsei comments, "That's Mr. Rules' theme," with Susie responding that it's the theme of him getting his ass kicked. For Dark Sanctuary, Susie says that she heard the song before and that it was, quote, the one Ralsei was humming earlier. The thing all of these tracks have in common is that the text implies that the characters of the game hear the associated music. And while I think it's objectively hilarious to imagine that Rules radiates his theme like some sort of jukebox, I think this information is truly interesting. Music is super important to the world of Deltarune for us, the player. Think about it this way: when we hear a song, we connect it to the character or event that it's tied to. The Freedom motif is for the bosses, Girl Next Door is for Noelle, Smart Race is for Birdly. So many characters in Deltarune have their own themes. And the fact that we can now say for certain that the characters of Deltarune are also making that connection is fascinating. There are certain tracks that we could already kinda guess existed in the universe, like Raise Up Your Bat, but 2 tracks stand out above all the others when it comes to importance in universe: Don't Forget and Lost Girl. Starting with Lost Girl, we actually know a surprising amount about this track. Maybe Toby really likes it. I know I sure do. In 2019, Toby made a post on Twitter titled Lost Girl parentheses Noelle. This post had the full track Lost Girl along with Noelle in her Dark World outfit. But the most important thing is that it features a comment from Toby that reads the following: "I said this was Noelle's theme, but it's actually kind of a song that gets used repeatedly all over the game, even when she's not around." And we see Lost Girl in multiple places in Deltarune, just like Toby says. Lost Girl is used as a track to signify that a moment is heavy, serious, or sad. It's a truly beautiful track and makes you feel wistful in a way that's difficult to describe. My interpretation of this is that the reason Lost Girl is the theme of Noelle is because it was written by Des, much like Raise Up Your Bat. It became her theme because of Des and her guitar. That's why I was so unsurprised when we get Susie saying, "I wonder if I could learn it on guitar when we play Lost Girl on the grand piano." It was written for guitar by Des and has a strong connection with Noelle. Another way we can connect this to Des is the Gumball Secret Room and the /Des page of the Spampton Sweepstakes. Both of these locations have the same track, findher.ogg, a guitar rendition of Lost Girl, and on the website we get to see Des's red guitar. So what does this mean? Did I just waste your time talking about Lost Girl for no reason? Well, there's a method to my madness, I promise. If the music of Deltarune is heard by the characters, then a track as important as Lost Girl will surely leave an impact on the world. It once symbolized the sisterhood of Noelle and Des, but now instead symbolizes sadness, a void that it's up to us to fill. Here's a hot take for you. Des will come back in Deltarune. We will fulfill the message left to us and succeed in finding her. And when we do, Lost Girl will be recontextualized in a new way. It will be symbolic of neither the sisterhood of Noelle and Des or the sadness of her absence. It will symbolize hope, the possibility of a better future for the world of Deltarune, and the healing of past scars. And speaking of symbolism, Don't Forget is one of the most iconic and symbolic tracks in all of Deltarune. People have theorized a ton about what the lyrics mean and how they may apply to events we have either seen already or will see in the future. But in this video, my focus is squarely on how the game's sound design contributes to it feeling alive. The motif of Don't Forget can be found in so many songs in Deltarune that it would be a waste of time to name every single one, and how the motif works in that scene. Instead, we're going to focus on the more meta aspect of the music, which is when we first hear the song Don't Forget in its entirety, at the end of Chapter 1. Throughout the whole of Chapter 1, we hear Don't Forget woven into so many songs, as I mentioned earlier, which is part of what makes hearing the full song for the first time feel so meaningful. We're finally getting context for what the motif truly means. When we hear the song, it makes us recontextualize all the previous times we heard it. Think of his theme from Undertale. We hear the motif in other songs like Memory, but hearing the full song for the first time changes how it feels to hear the motif in other tracks. Knowing the full track, Don't Forget, changes how it feels to listen to the tracks with the motif in it. This contributes to what I was talking about earlier, about how we connect emotions to music, and Toby uses music to cue us into how we should be feeling. And this brings up one of the most interesting questions Deltarune asks related to music. Who wrote these songs? And I'm obviously not talking about Toby. I mean in-universe. I said earlier that I believe Des wrote the track Lost Girl, and I think it seems likely that she also wrote Don't Forget. But who wrote the music for the characters of Deltarune? I joked earlier about Rules radiating his own theme, but who wrote that song? Did Rules write it? What about Big Shot? That song features lyrics from Spampton to us. Does that mean he wrote it? I think the answer to this question is pretty complicated. It seems likely that some, but not all, of the music in Deltarune is heard by the party. And I think that songs can be important without being diegetic to the player. Did Spampton write Big Shot in the 5 seconds he was Spampton Neo before the fight? I'm gonna guess no on that one. Does Big Shot directly connect to the fight at hand though? I mean, yeah, it absolutely does. And it also tells us important information about the narrative of the game from the point of view of Spampton. Is it able to be heard by the Lighteners? I have no idea. It might be that the lyrics are directed at us as Spampton wishes to surpass the light world and reach for heaven. When you start asking these types of questions about the sound, you get into a huge rabbit hole. So what I'm gonna do is wrap up this section and then only talk about concrete things for the rest of the video. The music of Deltarune sculpts itself to each situation, whether it was written in-universe or not. The reason Noelle's theme is Lost Girl is because Des wrote it. The game itself recognized that it had a connection to her and made it her theme. I think it's quite likely that in Deltarune, a bunch of songs are heard by party members, and I think the answer creates unique narrative opportunities with songs tied to characters, especially the 2 tracks Don't Forget and Lost Girl. There is another smoking gun, though, that I haven't mentioned when it comes to proving party members can hear the music of Deltarune, and that's because I wanted to save it for its own section. I feel as though this is pretty common knowledge, but in Chapter 4, if you're in the vents of the holiday house while Chris is in the kitchen, they begin to play the piano. The songs that Chris plays are the following: Lancer Waltz, a remix of the song Lancer; Last Prophecy, an unused track which ends up turning into a remix of Castletown; Prophecy, which samples Don't Forget but goes unused; Quiz, the track from Chapter 3's game show; Rules; 7-4, another unused track which bears no motific identity that I could hear, but sounds vaguely similar to songs from the Light World, with the name likely being the song's time signature, 7-4. Chop, the track Toby told us would be in Chapter 5 onwards as the final shop theme, and finally, Waiting Room, a track based on the Green Room from Chapter 3. Most of these songs feature music we hear in the game, with two glaring exceptions. While I'll talk about the unused tracks soon, this pretty much proves that Chris can hear the music of the game. The sound of the game is not only building out the world for us, the player, but also for the characters of Deltarune. The concept of game shows exists in Deltarune, same as the real world, and the song Quiz that we hear is not only there to reinforce that it's a quiz show for us, but also for the Lighteners. So this raises the big question: how can Chris play songs we haven't heard yet in-game? Well, I think the answer to this question is pretty boring, unfortunately, and it's that Chapters 3, 4, and 5 were originally supposed to release together. We know for a fact that Shop will be used in Chapter 5, and 7-4 was likely also meant to be in Chapter 5. This is the same explanation that I've heard for the Bibliox text, the ones that name all the songs from the OST, with all the ones that we don't fit bearing a naming scheme that would point us towards Chapter 5 being Flower King, like Amphitheater, Synthesis, and Roots, all of which are things that would perfectly fit with a Flower Kingdom. There's one more category of sound that I think is important to the narrative, and that's songs that belong to us, the player. We actually have a couple tracks in the game, namely Your Power and Concert for You. The first song, Your Power, is maybe the single most important song for understanding how the player fits into the world of Deltarune. Our power is to seal dark fountains. The triumphant music is to reinforce that we, the player, are meaningful in a narrative sense. The Chapter 4 phone call says, "Chris without soul can't." And the Japanese translation all but confirms that this is a reference to Dark Worlds and to sealing fountains. This track is what makes our connection to the world of Deltarune important. Without us, Chris is unable to achieve their goal of progressing the story and to achieve their own ends. But speaking of things one can do but not the other, let's talk about Concert for You. This track on Deltarune's soundtrack is just a sad plunk, followed by Chris being annoyed. The important things about this are the title, Concert for You, which is the only title besides Your Power that is directed at us, the player, in the fact that it shows the limitations of our control over Chris. Chris can play the piano, we cannot. I mean usually, unless you're awesome and cool in the real world. The music in this case teaches us about our connection to Chris, and further cements the fact that they're not some blank slate to project onto, but their own character with skills and hobbies. The music of Deltarune plays a huge role in how we engage with the narrative, and not only that, it has also become an iconic piece of its online presence. Music is impossible to separate from Deltarune, and I hope in this video I was able to get you to consider some of the ways that music is used. With that said, thanks so much for watching. If you have anything to add to the conversation, please leave a comment below. I'm super nervous that I messed up something in the music theory section, even though I did try to check it. That's all for now. See you next time.